has the owner's backing as part of the annexation application, which is the case. At least one of the parcels of each annexation is contiguous to the existing city limit boundary, which is the case. The parcels are within the urban growth boundary, which is the case. And the land is part of an acknowledged comprehensive plan, which is the case because our comprehensive plan goes out in our urban growth boundary area and says how we're planning for that area. And then it says the final condition is that the petition conforms with all other requirements of city ordinances. So that's where you review this just as you always would, with the idea that you're checking to make sure, as staff did in our staff report, that the application meets the city's annexation ordinance requirements. And if we find that that is true as well, then the logical conclusion would be that you would recommend approval of the annexations if you feel like it meets all of the city's annexation ordinance requirements.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll go from there and review the first one. I think there's a map. This map shows the location of all three applications, and we're starting with the one up here at the top. It's the smallest one. So it's about 1.58 acres. It involves two different tax lots, two sets of owners. And it also has existing development on each of those tax lots, has two houses on them. And the northernmost one has indicated that they're coming into the city partially because they are currently have an issue with the county because of the two houses on the property. And so they said, well, here's a way to come into the city and we'll have an opportunity to decide if we're going to be a part of the future redevelopment that the concept development plan had indicated for this entire 66 acre. And this annexation application did involve a neighborhood meeting that's in accordance with the normal process that's outlined in the city code. The remaining two annexations, I won't get into that too much now, but they did not hold their individual neighborhood meetings. And apparently there was some discussion among senior staff and such through the initial process as they were trying to make application that implied that that would not be necessary, and I can explain that a little bit later on the subsequent one. So let's move on, and what I wanted to go through one time, kind of like you did with your script, is that these are the annexation criteria that all three of these annexations must abide by in order to be approved or recommended to go forward. The first one is that it's either designated on the annexation ordinance map as being in a development agreement area or being in a development concept plan area. And all three of these applications are in number B here, which is the development concept plan area. And it says that the city must adopt a binding development concept plan for this area prior to agreeing to rezone or annex. And we did that about 5 months ago through a year-long process when we adopted the North Redwood Development Concept Plan through a consulting public input process that was all specifically aimed and for the purpose of being able to satisfy the annexation number one requirement is that there's an approved development concept plan before you can annex. And so that is one of the major criteria, and it's already been taken care of for all three of these applications at the city's initiative to get that concept plan done under the city's own dime to facilitate the future urbanization of this area and thus help those individual property owners as they contemplated potential redevelopment of their property in the future. That concept plan addressed these 8 parameters throughout the study. And that's important because one of the most important criteria is that you're convinced that adequate services are going to be available or can be made available through the development process once they're annexed. And so that's what the concept plan process was for, is to make sure that we know where the water and sewer lines are coming from, that they're sized, will be sized adequately, that our overall city systems can handle it, and that the proposed circulation system with streets in the area will be addressed so that when development is proposed, they will place streets in accordance with that concept plan, and that we studied the stormwater and how that would be addressed. And depending on what portion of the site you're developing, there are different solutions indicated in that concept plan on how they will address stormwater at that time to be in accordance with the overall concept of how stormwater would be taken care of. And the biggest part of that plan was really dealing with the parks and open space and how we would address an equitable means where some property owners are actually dedicating either a substantial or a over half of their property towards a park, therefore giving up their development possibilities, and how they would be reimbursed by the other property owners in a manner to make them all relatively equal in the process. So that's what that concept plan has done for us. And again, in staff's way of thinking, that year-long process involved all of the property owners that are involved in the plan area, thus all the property owners that are a part of this annexation process, and should, in our mind, have adequately served because of its recentness of the neighborhood meeting requirements that we normally have. And I might make note that we had a concerned citizen that submitted a letter that's in your packet about that issue. He had some other issues as well, but that was one of them. The mayor put this item on the May 4th council agenda, and we discussed it with the council. And they seem to accept staff and the city administrator's explanation, as I've just given, as to why we didn't call these applications incomplete and send them back to do a neighborhood meeting. The plan hasn't changed since it was adopted, and it was adopted specifically to allow them to make annexation applications. Let's see, probably the second most important issue is an analysis for the need for additional property within the city limits for the type of zoning that would be proposed. And the applicants have submitted with some input from staff to supply some data the best we could, and additional work by the applicants to come up with how much existing platted lots we have remaining in the city that are vacant, that could be developed, of the zoning type that's involved. And so you'll see information in the staff report that, to staff's understanding, indicates that we have just under a 3-year supply of available platted lots. In fact, every day it's considerably less because we're doing so many building permits this year and last year that we will be out of lots very soon. And so this is a very good time for annexation to be occurring to give us that supply of buildable platted lots again. There is some additional land that is not currently platted that could be platted and developed, but that process takes 2 to 3 years to go through that or more to get the infrastructure in place and such. So by policy, the city council many years ago had indicated that when they talk about a 3-year supply as being sufficient, they have fine-tuned that to say of platted lots available that have all the necessary infrastructure there and ready to go. Some of the other review criteria are pretty general in nature, a statement of the potential physical, aesthetic, and related social effects of the proposal on the community as a whole and on the neighborhood, with the idea that we're trying to understand if the annexation and the fact that it portends future development and what kind of development would that likely be and what impact is that likely to have on that particular area. And speaking of that, we had Sunday, one other letter came in that we placed at your dais. That was from Robert Bitter, and indicated that he's very much in support of seeing future development of these properties, but he is concerned about the additional traffic that's going to be placed upon North Redwood Street, given that it's deteriorated and is rapidly deteriorating, and that he has an understanding, I know Robert, that there will be improvement to the road adjacent to where development occurs, but not necessarily the full distance of the road. And so there's areas outside of where this development's going to occur that also need improvement. And so that's what his primary concern is. And I did respond back and let him know that that's primarily an issue of city prioritization of where we end up spending the limited gas tax money and SDC money that we collect. And will it be on those areas outside where the developer is helping the street, and the rest that the city will likely have to figure out how to improve in the future. The other statements here I mentioned before is that you're convinced that there's adequate capacity, water, sewer, drainage, transportation, park, and school facilities, and how they're being handled. And we think the concept planning project adequately addressed these for the entire area as a whole, thus for each individual application. And again, a related statement of how that increased demand for such facilities is going to be handled, and if there's any specific issues about how it might be financed. And the plan was intended to help address how some of those things would happen, other than the fact that all internal pipes and services to future subdivisions are done by a subdivider, by the developer. The city doesn't do that. And if necessary, they extend lines to their development, so their lines will go somewhere as well if they're the first in the development process. So generally speaking, developers supply those improvements, and the planning process indicated where they were going to come from, so everybody's aware of what's going to be needed if they should develop their property, depending on where it's located. The last conditions talked about any conformance, any other applications that might be needed, and conformance with other city ordinances and with the Oregon revised statutes, which we've indicated in here that all three of the applications are conforming with the Oregon revised statutes and the recent legislation, that if the council acts upon a recommendation from you and approves these annexations, then they're the final approving authority and the voters will not be looking at these particular requests. On this particular annexation, I don't think I have it up here. That's the second one, so that is the one right there. Okay, so the only condition that we had on this particular annexation involved the first condition that was in our recommendation, and staff did recommend approval for this annexation, and had a discussion with the applicant at the counter today, and it regards the fact that the current property has two houses on it, and he had openly admitted that that's causing him a code enforcement issue in the county right now. Okay, so the thought was bring it into the city, and hopefully that will solve his issue with the county. And in our review of the application, and as we thought about this in detail, we indicated that, actually this is going to be a violation of our R1 zone district to have two houses on the property when we annex it. In our early discussions with the applicant, we were thinking at the time, well, I guess it could be grandfathered in. You're coming into the city, it's already there. Are we going to stop you from annexing because you happen to have two houses on the property? So as we looked at it closer in drafting the staff report, we thought about the fact that, well, it is possible that if they would follow up the annexation with a possible partition of the property, put each house on a separate lot, they could come in conformance with the city's R1 zone. They didn't have that option in the county because the zoning is different and they didn't have any opportunity to divide the property. It's not allowed to be divided. And so they needed annexation to solve that issue. The other possibility is that we allow accessory dwelling units on one lot as it is today. And this kind of applies to both of the properties, so it's kind of unique because there's two tax lots involved in this annexation. Each one has two existing homes on them. The other lot to the south has a second home that is considered by the county and has been permitted for years as a hardship case. There is I'm not sure if I remember whether it's an elderly family member, but it's a family member that needs assistance, and so it's a hardship case, and the county had that. We also have a similar provision in the city ordinances that could allow, if someone wanted to place a second home on a property for a hardship case, we have a process for that as well. This condition was to let you know that there was going to be this nonconformity involved with this annexation. It's within your prerogative, if you feel comfortable, to say they're grandfathered in. This is the way it's coming into the city. We'll just happen to have two houses on each of these R1 zone properties because that's the zoning that will be assigned. We wanted you to be aware of this nonconformity, and that if we asked them to follow up within 6 months of annexation and either partition the property, get a conditional use permit for an accessory dwelling, or in the case of the hardship unit, come in with a special permit application to seek their own special permit, which the planning director can actually issue. Actually, I think I can only do that for 6 months, so they'd probably be in front of the Planning Commission for a longer period of time. That's another process that we could, so that they come in conforming to our R1 zone. And so it's kind of up to you. I told the applicant we didn't feel comfortable not pointing out the nonconformity, but I'm also okay with grandfathering in. I don't know of any precedent for this. I don't know of any ordinance that addresses this. So I think it's within your prerogative to decide whether they just bring it in as it is or whether they try to solve that. And if you want them to solve it, this is our condition of approval that you would add to approval of this in order to have them solve the nonconformity. And unfortunately, we just didn't think of that in our early discussions prior to the application being made. And it wasn't until we really put the thought processes in that, oh, well, they're solving their county problem, but they're giving us one if you want full conformance with our ordinances. That's my staff report.
Any questions? I just want to be clear on something that the 1601 that we're considering right now, they did have a neighborhood meeting about this particular annexation?
Yes,
They did?
yes,
Okay. And the other two did not?
they did not.
Okay. And let's move forward with the applicant.
Ryan Oliver, 1850 North Redwood. How's everybody doing tonight? Good? All right. So,
Somebody tried to bribe me with chocolate. I'm assuming that's not, I'm assuming that's not you.
no.
Okay.
So I'm a first timer at this, so I'm not really sure what you want, need, expect. I guess my co-applicants are back here, and we're just obviously hoping for your blessing on moving this on to the city council with our annexation. As Brian said, our annexation is not a for development, so to speak. We're just trying to we have some stuff going on with the county that we come into the city. Apparently, we want to pay more taxes, I guess, is more.
Very nice of you.
Yes, well, we're givers.
Let me make note of that. Okay. So this is your 15 minutes of
Fame?
fame, yeah. So you get to tell us why we should, but if you're good with just what the staff report is, we're good with that as well.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to take 15 minutes of your time, but I think both of us, as I stated and as Brian stated, our development is kind of unique in that we both have different situations with the county that we have to require. I kind of bought a property that had not, I guess the county doesn't do very good with their permit keeping, and so I bought a problem, if you will. I found out 2 years after I purchased it that my property was non-conforming, so lucky me. So that's what I fell into. And our neighbors who have the medical hardship on their property. And so basically, we understand that the development, the master plan is there, and so we obviously have our issue with the county. And so basically, we just want to annex in. We still don't have any plans to develop. I just assume live there for 10, 15 more years. We love the country setting, but this is kind of what we have to do to alleviate our situation with the other jurisdiction that we currently live in. So that's why we're coming your way.
You currently live on the property?
Yes.
And does Lloyd and Joanne Walsh still live on the property as well? That's you back there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And as Brian said, in our pre-app meeting, we discussed, our situation, and it was a deal of, at that time, they didn't think we would have to do any type of parceling it off or special permitting, because it was basically, if we parcel off now and then develop, basically we're making a lot, and it may have to be moved. According to the master plan, there's a road going through my yard and potentially the house, and so it's basically, it doesn't do you any good to start parsing things off if you're just going to have to start tweaking it once development starts happening. And so that was our meeting in the pre-app was, unless you sell one of the houses or develop, then you guys should be good to go once you're annexed in. And so I think that's what he was alluding to with the grandfathering stuff of, it really doesn't make any sense to start making lots if you're just going to start running roads right through the middle of them. So that's what I'll speak on that. Yeah.
Do you have any, are you okay with the conditions? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I think we could find an arrangement there.
Okay. Any more questions for Ryan?
I'm not real clear about the future streets and the development that you just talked about.
Well, looking at this, at the master plan,
A little vague.
I think 18th.
Yeah, they're trying to
I
line
saw
that
that.
street that goes through
They
there.
have, I think it's 18th. 18th place is existence now. And then if you just cut across Redwood, there's I'm looking, I don't know what you guys have on that.
Yeah, it's going right through your side yard, isn't it?
Yeah, and basically it goes right through that front house. It'll
Yeah.
have about a 2 feet of right of way next to that other house. So you either have to be a jog. It's not gonna work out precisely without either taking down the house or making a jog in that road. So I don't know how strict they are to master plans, but that's kind of where. So that's why we didn't really like the idea of parsing it off, because we figure at some point there's going to be a road that's going to be 2 feet from that house.
Okay. That help you out, John?
Ryan, if we were to offset that future street to the south, then we're going to not have a intersection as we desire. Is that correct?
Yeah, potentially. It's pretty important to try to align streets across. That's a pretty important principle. So I think we're going to be hard pressed. It's kind of like the driveway issue we were talking about before, but it's more so with a city street. You either want an adequate offset or you want them to align, and in this case, I think it probably messes up the concept plan quite a bit if you move it so far that you have an adequate offset, because there are distance requirements in the code for that. And then you're going to mess up the circulation plan inside. So what probably happens is these two lots, this 1 point some acres with 4 existing houses, is just not a part of the redevelopment plan until they decide that they're going to remove houses and take advantage of the redevelopment possibilities, which could have many more lots, not just one more lot in the partition. Ryan's right in that having 2 homes in an R1 zone makes it non-conforming to our code. It's not likely to be a problem, but it will be a problem for certain if he tries to sell the property. There'll be a cloud on the property. Somebody's going to notice that right away, that doesn't conform, but probably not until he tries to sell it. Then the other solution that we put in this condition is that he could seek a conditional use permit and call the other dwelling an accessory unit. The problem we've discovered with that is that it actually exceeds the size limit, but then that could be accounted for in the conditional use permit that it was existing, came in with annexation, and couldn't help it that it was 1,200 square feet rather than 800. But, so we thought about these things a little bit in terms of writing up the condition, but again, it could be grandfathered in as well.
Well, the northeast 18th place goes in and goes to the east of Redwood. how much clearance is there to these dwellings?
I don't know. I kind of eyeball. I'm not sure. I haven't really measured it off. Just because I know that I'm the first piece that's going in, and that road kind of cuts through 3 or 4 other properties that aren't annexing in. So I know it's not anytime soon that's going to be punched through. So I was just thinking, like, long term, how does this shake out? Because when that comes through, I'll probably be selling it. I won't be the one that's going to be living there when that thing punches through. So I was just trying to eyeball, like, okay, what's this look like with that front house? But I think it's going to be a ways off, just because I don't know if the other property owners back there are too keen on annexing at this point. But I don't speak for them, but.
I'd feel better if we could put a resolution to this so we're not pushing the misery down the road on somebody else, but it doesn't sound like there's a real clear, easy way. I mean, we can grandfather, we get accessory dwelling, but short of that street not going in, I don't know how we're going to keep butchering those 2 properties. 2 existing buildings.
Right.
Homes.
Yeah.
With you on that. Anything, Sean? No? Any questions? Thank you very much. Are there any more proponents who would like to? Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name's Daniel Webb. I live at 1864 North Redwood Street. I just wanted to say that I did attend their neighborhood meeting that Ryan and the other folks had, and I just wanted to reaffirm my backing of their annexation application. I did want to interact one other thing, and you were talking about grandfathering in. I don't want to cause them any additional cost or anything like that, but I'm concerned that if you set a precedent by grandfathering this in, what's that going to enable anybody else in the city to do as well? That's my only concern with that. So I would prefer to see them handle this in some other way, either conditioned upon a partition or a conditional use for an ADU or something like that, something simple, but just so that it's in conformance with the code. So rather than the planning commission and city council going outside of that and grandfathering in something like this, which would set a precedent for later.
Any questions for Mr. Webb? Thank you very much. Are there any more proponents? Okay.
Carol Bergeron, 1868 North Redwood. I'm the lot way in the back next to Daniel that's not annexing in. And, I have lived next door to both the Welches and Olivers, and the situation of their home presents no problem. It would be easy if you could just grandfather it in and until the future, who knows. But I don't know if I agree with the master plan 100%, but it's like, I think that'll be years down the line before it happens. And so, I have the right-of-way that goes, it's 26 feet, that goes from 19th Loop in between the Olivers, and it goes all the way to that back property. And so they've taken that away literally in the master plan and made my access way somewhere around, as a dead end kind of circular thing. So I'm not happy with that, but with the current situation, there's no problem with the 2 later, the current annexation plan of having that grandfathered in. So.
Do you know where she lives?
I think it's this back. You're at the far lot.
Yeah, the
way,
far
right?
lot. The
Can you
very
see
end
that
lot.
for me?
The original lot that I bought.
This one right here?
No, put the one in back of 19th Loop.
Oh,
Oh,
The
okay.
yeah.
Got it.
The little flag lot there,
Okay.
which
And that's the driveway that's between the two.
Yeah. So, it does a lot of strange things. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more proponents? Are there any opponents? Anybody that we would consider neutral, or can they consider neutral? Any rebuttal? Ryan? Anything more you'd like to say?
No, well, I guess it's not really a rebuttal, but just as far as that grandfather did, I would go back to the point of our pre-app meeting when my consultant, Tom Scott, who is a developer in town here, helping the blind here go through this, is when we had in the pre-app with Brian and Matilda again, when we talked about, okay, here's our situation, and it was brought up that until we either sell either of the properties or develop the properties, then we wouldn't have to parcel off. Because really, there's nothing going on in the property until those two things take place. And so that was kind of what we've been known, or what we've been going off of until we got this back, was that we were gonna, that we'd be fine until something, either a sale or development triggered, that we have to do something. So that would be the only thing I would say on the grandfather. But with that being said, we don't want to muddy the waters, I guess. So if this is we have to figure out something on these lines, then that's the way we'll work. Obviously, we prefer to go with and I don't even know if grandfathered in is the right term, but that's what we're using tonight. So, I mean, that would be our preferred choice until again, either a sale or development triggered the development to either parcel off or to move forward with that. But with that, I'll let it go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Since there's no more testimony, I'm going to close public hearing portion of the meeting. So any more questions, gentlemen, for staff, or? You look pensive there, Mr. Surlett. I don't know, pensive is not a good way to be, but that's where you seem to be.
You're right.
Okay. Any discussion? Sean?
I think the grandfathered in, that word is kind of steering us in the wrong direction. From what I'm understanding, Brian, it's not necessarily, we're not giving them any special right. We're just saying it's going to stay the way that it is for now. They still have to go through every hoop that we have them go through when they go to develop or they go to sell it. So if I'm understanding what you're saying.
I think we could probably get rid of the word grandfathering, and the technical zoning is that if you annex this property as it sits today, you will be creating a nonconformity to the R1 zone. And so through time, if someone was to come in and say they wanted to add an accessory dwelling to their property or something, or they wanted to put up a storage building, staff would analyze that proposal and we say, oh, did you know you have two houses on here? That's a non-conforming situation. Well, how did that happen? Well, it happened when we were annexed. And I don't know of any way or whether we have to address that. I just want it to be open that we're creating a nonconformity when we annex the way it is. And I always apologize when we don't tell applicants everything they need to know when we're having informal pre-app meetings and such. But until you make an application and we have the review process, we don't know and can't answer every question that comes up. And so there's court cases that have demonstrated that over and over, and just thrown out applicants' lawsuits against the cities because they didn't divulge everything during informal talks. That's why we have a review process, is so that we can think about it and analyze it. And that's when it became obvious that we were focusing on getting them out of a situation, but also putting them in one, and we hadn't focused on that side of it.
I've got one question.
Sure.
Brian, what's the burden that's put on them for either partitioning or the conditional use permit?
Well, partitioning, if you meet the parameters, is a very simple and straightforward process, and but you do have to meet the setback requirements from where you propose your property line. So you have to make sure there's enough space between the houses to be able to meet the setback requirements. And if you do, and you have a means of access for both resulting lots, you'll be approved. A conditional use permit has some degree of question as to whether it will absolutely be approved. Almost all are, but you can put conditions of approval to make them more compatible if necessary. So generally speaking, they're fairly straightforward applications, but they do cost money, a couple $1,000s to go through the process in a couple months. As you know, these are the kind of applications that come in front of you in order to resolve the situation. But that would be the official way, and they have a choice. It's not just one.
Thank you.
Any more questions, thoughts?
I actually have one for Mr. Oliver, and you guys are all right with this choice, right? You're okay with this option of within 6 months you guys need to do something with this, is what I'm reading here.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah, and that's, if it comes down to it, I think, right? If it comes down to it, we have the 6 months, and we'd obviously prefer, like I said before, doing the other way where we're being annexed in with our situation, and so and we're not changing anything, we're not developing, so there's no trigger. But if Plan B is the only way to do it, then I guess we'll do Plan B.
okay.
Brian, do you have this one on a slide?
I think we do, Laney. We don't. No. Can't show it.
What I was wondering, it's going to be hard to show everybody, but on this parcel right here, how is that accessed right now? Does it access to Redwood?
Which one are you doing, John? I think it's down the same driveway as.
So there's a driveway, so the driveway is right. So the driveway comes back like this. For that one, and the driveway right here for that one. Your driveway's right here. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That one, that one, that one. All the black lines drawn in.
That's where the current driveways are.
If I just quick, so I was told, because I was checking out these options, and I'm told that to do the parcel, it's closer to $10,000 to get it all done. And then I think this one, the other one, the conditional use is $2,400, I think you said. I think the permit is $1,200 for the parcel, but it costs you, after you get the surveyor and everybody else to come out, you're into it about 10 grand. Versus, and then the conditional one's about $2,500. So to answer the commissioner's question about what it's into us, yes, it's permit, but then there's also
Right.
some pocket money that needs to come out as well.
Any more questions or discussion? First, I want to commend you for holding the neighborhood meeting and getting input from your neighbors. That's an important thing, particularly in light of the fact that it's the only opportunity that your neighbors or the community will have for giving you input. So that is, I think that's a very important thing. So I will entertain a motion to approve. Do we have a motion?
I'm not sure that we do. This that was put in here, Brian, about the 6 months and everything, this was, if we decide to take this out, it just gets left, right? Then they're just non-conformant until something is done with this piece of property.
Right. Either they find out they need to because they're going to try to sell it, and they're going to have to solve their own problem,
Sound familiar?
or
You're on your own.
So if we drop number 1 out of this, that just brings them in as they're annexed in then. And then anything that happens further, they want to do anything with this property, they're going to have to come back to us again and say, okay, now we need to deal with this.
right.
That's kind of where I'm leaning. It's just to drop number 1.
And then deal with it down the road.
Yeah, I really feel like that's the better avenue. It's a better avenue for the property owners, and Ryan wants to give us money as taxation, so why not?
And I was willing to settle for this.
So I would move that we alter this by dropping number 1 out of here and approve ANN/ZC 16-01 with just number 2 in our.
Just for the recommendation would then be approval, but the recommendation would be upon annexation, the zoning of the subject properties be designated as R1 as indicated by the North Redwood Development Concept Plan Map and the Canby Comprehensive Plan Map would be the only. Okey-dokey?
I'd second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve ANN/ZC 16-01 with the only condition being upon annexation, the zoning of the subject properties be designated as R1 as indicated by the North Redwood Development Concept Plan Map and the Canby Comprehensive Plan Map. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oops, lost my gavel. There you go. Laney, you want to take a minute? 2 minutes, folks. 4, 3, 2, 1. As we talked about before, I will not go through the public hearing script. We'll just scamper right along to the next item, which is an annexation and zone change request for ANM/ZC16-02. Brian.
Okay, so here's the map again. So now it looks like we're skipping down to this lower one, which indicates that it's 3 different tax lots with a total of 4.57 acres. And I didn't mention before, but all these properties are RRFF5 county zoning, and is proposed to be rezoned, this one, to the R1.5 zone and the R2 zone. So the lower tax lot, which is adjacent to an existing R2 zone property, would have that R2 zone, which makes it a little bit different than the remainder larger particular one. So let's see. I'm going to get confused on the case number here. So we're looking at 2. And there's the 2. So in the staff report, make sure that I have the second one. We went through the same set of review criteria and such, with our initial focus being we're dealing with the concept plan again that was developed and through that year-long process for the purpose of annexation. And so we've adopted that plan, so that criteria has been met. And the same issue with the second criteria on is there a need for additional zoning. Well, in the R1.5, that is the area where we have the least number of existing zoning districts, and certainly developed platted lots are practically non-existent for that zone. And so that zone district is easily meeting that criteria. We have nowhere near a 3-year supply of platted lots in the R1.5 district. It's a little bit more difficult looking at R2 because it could be divided into lots, or it could be a big development on a single lot. And so a little bit more difficult to use that platted lot policy when you're looking at the R2 zone. But we're well aware of the fact that any apartment complex of any size has a very difficult time finding a location in town today, because we've had 2 now. One that's you approved, another that's going to be coming before you before long. And the only other land that we have available that's R2 involves the area immediately outside of the downtown area of Canby, a significant amount that has R2 zoning that is all currently developed with detached single-family homes, which means anybody that wanted to take advantage of redevelopment opportunity would need to buy up from willing property owners to make up another area for future multifamily development in the community. That's one reason part of the lots, the Sequoia Grove was rezoned in the industrial park, because there just isn't any other location except just outside of the edge of the downtown commercial zone to do that. And it's lot assembly, which is very difficult and hard to do. It would take a big outfit. or a very small complex in order to accomplish that. So we think that that meets the criteria as well as need for more R2 developable land within the county, in the city, in order to provide that variety of housing types that we need for the community to serve housing needs of all types of residents and their needs. This slide, and that's really the only slide that I have here, is just that we've recommended approval for this one, as well as the next one as well. And yes, this is one, as we mentioned before, they did not do a neighborhood plan. From visiting with the senior planner, it was because of her assistance while they were putting the application together. She said, oh no, we just did several neighborhood plans by inviting the entire neighborhood to participate in the development concept planning process, and so that had been satisfied. And I agreed with her, and so we did not require them to do that and have used that previous process.
Brian, can I interrupt for just, when did
Yes.
that occur? I mean, what,
When did which occur?
when they were told, when the applicant was told that they did not need to,
Somewhere in the process from January 1st through February 28th, when they finally submitted their application, and went through a lot of assistance with staff in that process. And I personally was somewhat surprised when I saw that one had done one because and the other had not. But then I thought about it and said, oh, they were told that they didn't really need one from another staff member, and I said, oh,
and
I
again,
would
what
agree.
was the reasoning behind telling them that they did not need to?
There's several reasons. One of the primary ones is the sole purpose of the year-long process that was just completed, that the entire area participated in and was invited to participate, and most of the neighbors did participate, was to satisfy the annexation requirement. Everybody knew that's why we were doing the plan. And the plan has not changed since it was adopted. And annexations are not development proposals. And we explained this to the council as well. We would never waive a neighborhood meeting requirement for a development proposal. An annexation is not a development proposal. There will be more neighborhood meetings when a development proposal is proposed on this annexation land.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yep, and that's really all, I guess, unless you have questions about any of the particular reasoning that the applicant submitted in their, which you could probably ask them in terms of answering the criteria requirements. But we felt like they satisfactorily answered these questions.
Any questions for Brian? Okay. We have the proponent here. I thought.
So, my name is Ethan Manuel. I live at 1612 North Redwood Street. Technically, I'm the applicant on the third of these things that you'll see, along with a group of other owners. I'm here representing the applicant on the second one, who's Alan Manuel, who's my father, because he was unable to be here at the time the meeting got scheduled. So, it seems like the neighborhood meeting stuff is important to you, so maybe I could address that at the start. We were heavily involved in the development concept plan process in terms of going to meetings. Alan was on one of the task force, so they had even more meetings. We came here and testified in front of yourselves about the development concept plan and that sort of stuff. So there was heavy community involvement for the people in this area from the neighborhood meetings. So I was actually the genesis of asking the question, which was, hey, we just came through all of this. This seems somewhat redundant to now call another meeting to talk about what we've just been talking about for a year. Generally, that was agreed to, and so we moved beyond that point. I would say a couple of things about it. One is we got information about who all the neighborhood associations were in town and had planned to have meetings with them post-application but before vote, because we had assumed that we would need to be out and telling our story about why it was a good thing for the community. So our plan all along was to meet with the neighborhood council or neighborhood associations, but before the vote, when it was closer to when people would be making that decision. Obviously, the state bill changed that. That happened after we had made our application and didn't have our neighborhood meetings. And frankly, between the second one and the third one, we represent more than half of the acreage in the development concept plan. So our ownership group that is bringing the applications forward to you is a pretty good sampling of the neighborhood that would be at a neighborhood association meeting anyway. So just felt like it was redundant, and we agreed to move on. So we were just following the directions there. Another thing that was talked about a little bit is the transportation in terms of the Redwood territorial connection. I guess all I would point out there is that the development concept plan process looked at not only our parcels that we're talking about, and specifically the 5 acres here, 4.5 acres, but the entire build-out of the development concept plan acres, the 60-plus acres, as if it was developed out to zoning and whether or not there was sufficient traffic infrastructure for that, and they found that there was. So, I go through that intersection that we're talking about every day on the way to work, along the path that you're talking about, not because I'm trying to bypass, but because that is the route, the shortest route. So. It's not a perfect intersection, but it was found to be acceptable. The development concept plan did a really good job of laying out the construct, the infrastructure, the roadmap, if you will, for how this stuff will get developed. I'm on this deal. I know Alan has been